And today, together with Alessandra Rodrigues Gomes from INPE, Brazilian Institute for Space Research, and Gabriela Takahashi Mayoshi from São Paulo State University, UNESP, and several others volunteers and members from the Geosciences Remote Sensing Society Brazilian chapter, spread all over the country. We are starting today with a great pleasure our annual event that in this year is in its sixth edition, the GRSS Young Professionals and ISPRS Student Consortium Summer School. For the first time, it is totally virtual and participants from all continents and more than 50 countries, as mentioned before. What is a great pleasure for us. Thank you all for your time. Whenever possible, please write in the chat your name and country. And before we start, I just want to show a short video. It's less than 5 minutes, okay? And is a video from the ISPRS Student Consortium delivered by the current chair, Ms. Cheryl Rose Rice.
Hi everyone, my name is Cheryl Rose Reyes, and I currently serve as the president of the International Society for Photogrammetry and Remote Sensing Student Consortium. I am very happy to welcome you all to the 6th edition of the IEEE GRSS Young Professionals and ISPRS Student Consortium Summer School this year. To start this event, I would like to present a bit about the ISPRS Student Consortium. We are the official representation of the youth to ISPRS. We link students, young researchers, and professionals worldwide interested in photogrammetry, remote sensing, and spatial information science to promote their scientific and professional developments. We advocate imaging and geospatial science for informed, scientifically valid, and technologically sound observations of Earth conditions and trends that lead to improved and effective decision-making. The consortium is also accepting registrations for individual membership. Please scan the QR code in this slide if you are interested to join us. I work together with members of the board of directors from all across the globe. Charles from Uganda is our vice president. Charmaine, who is currently in Ireland, is in charge of our newsletter. Mustafa, our social media administrator, is from Turkey. And finally, Sona from Azerbaijan is our web administrator. One of the major events that we host and coordinate every year are the summer schools. In 2019, the summer schools were in Uganda, Poland, South Korea, and Brazil. These summer schools provide international learning opportunities for students and young professionals at a minimum cost. This year, we scheduled 3 summer schools, but due to the COVID-19 situation, 2 of them were postponed, and we are sincerely thankful to the organizers of this summer school for making this an incredible virtual event. This is the first ISPRS Student Consortium Summer School that will be hosted online, and as you can see, we have an amazing lineup of speakers who will deliver lectures on remote sensing and machine learning. The consortium currently hosts the virtual rooms and the webinar series to provide our community with more opportunities to learn and interact with experts in our scientific community. The webinar series was conceptualized in 2018, and we have organized webinars on Google Earth Engine, computer vision, and machine learning. The virtual rooms is an initiative to keep the members of the consortium connected during this challenging time and to help them navigate our changing lifestyles. All the resources for the webinar series and the virtual rooms are available on our website and our YouTube channel. We also publish an official newsletter called Spectrum, which covers the broad applications of remote sensing, photogrammetry, and spatial information science, and welcomes contributors from diverse backgrounds and disciplines. We publish 4 issues a year, and our most recent issue is related to the current pandemic and the significance of geospatial information in tackling the impacts of this global health crisis to our society. The ISPRS Congress is one of the biggest gatherings in our scientific community, which is held every 4 years. The Congress hosted a virtual event for all papers submitted this year and postponed the in-person meeting for 2021. During the Congress, the Consortium will be hosting a 3-day youth forum, which will feature the following activities: speed dating, technical sessions, a special session on women in remote sensing, photogrammetry, and spatial information science, a panel discussion, the General Assembly for our members, a student night, another summer school, and will co-organize a mapping party. The Consortium would also like to invite you to nominate papers for the Excellence Award to be given during this event. Please scan the QR code for eligibility and nominations. Also, please visit the ISPRS Congress official website for updates. Finally, I would like to invite you all to join our communities on Facebook, Twitter, and to visit our website for all the information shared in this presentation. And again, I would like to invite you all to register as an individual member by scanning the QR code on the right. This is the end of my presentation, and I wish you all a meaningful summer school. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cheryl, for the nice words and the wonderful introduction. We again acknowledge the tremendous support from both societies, Geoscience and Remote Sensing Society, and International Society of Photogrammetry and Remote Sensing, in supporting our annual events since 2015. Well, our event this year consists on several lectures and a very intense program, and we will start today with Professor Raoni Guerra Lucas Rajão from the Federal University of Minas Gerais. Rajão, thank you a lot for accepting our invitation. Well, Professor Rajão is with the Department of Production Engineering at the Federal University of Minas Gerais, as mentioned before. He took a PhD in Organization, Work, and Technology from Lancaster University in 2011. His research focuses on the relation between science, technology, and policy, with a particular emphasis on deforestation control. And today, he will deliver the lectures entitled The Role of Geosciences in Achieving Deforestation-Free Supply Chains in Brazil. Professor Rajão, thank you again for accepting our invitation. So you are the first speakers from a total of 12. And we thank all the participants coming from all the continents and more than 50 countries. So please.
So good afternoon, Professor Beraldo. Thank you very much. Also, thanks, Professor Jefferson, for the invitation and for the proposal. It's a real pleasure to be here. And looking here on the comments, it's possible to see, people coming and commenting from Greece, Turkey, Serbia, lots of them from different parts of Brazil. So I'm really glad to be here and participating in this. So what we're going to be talking today is on the role of geosciences in achieving deforestation-free supply chains in Brazil, which is also related to an article that I was one of the co-authors that we published, our team published in Science early this year, that had quite a bit of a repercussion and a policy impact. So my objective here is to talk about this topic from a technical and a scientific point of view, but also emphasizing the challenges involved in making science that matters, a science that has policy and impact, and a science which basically tries to answer the demands from society, not only in Brazil but also in other countries. So I'm starting now with going on full screen. I hope you still see my, yeah. So one of the first points we want to raise is, okay, why to monitor supply chain? Why is it important to know where our food comes from, and where is it produced and how it's produced? And historically, the issue of monitoring supply chains has been more of a matter of health and sanitary issues. And for instance, one of the big pushes towards the monitoring of supply chains have happened in Europe following the mad cow disease in the UK. And but more and more, the debate around monitoring supply chains has been about environmental issues, not only in Brazil but also in other countries, such as palm oil in Southeast Asia, cacao in Africa and other products, timber. There has been, a lot of discussion about monitoring the timber supply chain in Europe and the United States with specific regulations. And more recently, there has been a lot of debates about the issues of monitoring, especially soy and beef supply chains, especially those produced in Brazil, who is one of the world's biggest producer of both and big exporters of both beef and soy internationally. And at the same time, we know from the research that large-scale cattle ranching and agriculture expansion are some of the key drivers of tropical deforestation, especially in Brazil. And at the same time, we have a problem where when you deforest without the proper authorizations, which we found, and also the studies have already been pointing out, are mostly done without those authorizations. So illegally, you are not only doing a damage to the environment, but also you're committing a crime. And since due to due diligence procedures adopted by different countries, you cannot buy a product that is linked to a crime. The same way you cannot buy a blood diamond from Africa, for instance. So it's very important for companies, increasingly also for different countries, to know where the product's coming from and whether it's linked to deforestation, whether that deforestation is illegal or not, since it raises other issues, not only environmental issues, but also legal issues. And one of the challenges we have today is that if you look at what the companies themselves would show on their behalf, and basically what they would present to the public, what they would present to buyers, is more or less like this. I've obscured. I've hidden here the name of the company. That doesn't matter here so much. But one of the points I want to raise for you is that this company here, as many of the big cattle meat packers in Brazil, slaughterhouses in Brazil, they have signed an agreement with the public attorneys, whereby they have to monitor their own supply chains, and they have to declare and show via independent monitoring how that's going on. And basically what they are saying here in this report from 2019, just published last year, is that they published 0 heads of cattle with illegal deforestation. So basically they are saying they are completely clean, and at the same time, for instance, on the website, what they're saying is that this company has scored very highly in a global sustainable ranking. However, what we see next is news articles and investigative journalists such as this from The Guardian saying that meat giants selling to the UK are linked to deforestation in Brazil, and we don't not only see this on news articles, but actually we see this in different scientific articles that have been pointing out that a lot of the cattle production in Brazil is linked to deforestation. So how come you have those two worlds, right? Where one is the company saying here we are all clean, and then what we see next other sources saying that's not quite the case. So one of the big issues here is that private monitoring alone has been proven to be unreliable, just because there's so much there is on the one hand the promise they have 0 deforestation, and you have data sources from other sides saying that's not the case. And at the same time, the Brazilian government, which has the means to do a transparent and strong monitor of the supply chains fails to do so. Apparently doesn't want to do so far. And so in this, what is the role for us, which are researchers, which are outside the government and outside the private sector, but which have the technological and the scientific means to contribute. So how can we contribute to that? How the geoscience could contribute to change the situation and to improve the transparency of supply chains? And it's not a easy problem because first of all, you have the issue of, okay, how do you detect deforestation? Okay, how do you? Of course, since Brazil it's of the size, it's of a continental size, to detect deforestation from the ground would be very expensive and also very unreliable. So it's very important to adopt, especially satellite-based remote sensing for that purpose. And then in that case of Brazil, we are really privileged because thanks to the efforts from the Brazilian Institute for Space Research, INPE, in the last 50 years, we have one of the most transparent and reliable deforestation monitoring systems in the world, which has been ongoing since 1988. And all the data is completely available online, and all the images that INPE used to do the classifications are also free, which means and open and available, which means that it's possible to perform independent verifications of those results. But it doesn't stop here. It's not enough to see that there has been deforestation on the ground. You have to relate that to a specific farm, to the legislation, and to a specific supply chain. So what you need next is to identify, okay, where that has happened, where that deforestation has happened. Is it close to a river? So it's basically interfering with riparian forests, so the damage is bigger. What kind of biomes is taking place? And there are major challenges in terms of cartography, hydrology, biology, in order to obtain that information, organize that information. You also, and this is very crucial here, you need to distinguish what kind of deforestation is legal and how much of that is illegal. And in order to understand what's legal and illegal, you need to understand the legislation. And so it's very important here to, as part of a multidisciplinary team, also involve people which have knowledge in law, and also engage with broader discussions with, for instance, the public attorneys, with the ministries themselves, in order to have a proper understanding of what the legislation is saying. And then after you have basically the input data, and also you were able to derive from a very complex legislation, such as the Brazil's Forest Code, which establishes conservation requirements, you must transform those requirements and with those raw input data into information about the level of legality of a specific farms. And this is possible thanks to spatial modeling, which again it's another discipline, it's another area which has its own challenges. And then you might be able, for instance, to do the spatial modeling of one farm, applying all those rules. And you're talking about here the need to analyze data with a high level of resolution. But what we need here in order to, for instance, understand deforestation in Brazil, and most importantly in the biomes of the Amazon and the Cerrado, which comprise more than a half of the country, you need to do this evaluation for 1 million farms. And in a territory which is the size of a continent. And in order to do that, it's not enough just to apply, basically to apply simplistic approaches, which does not deal with the issue of scale. And so what we need really here at this point is to involve also knowledge about computer science, parallel computing, big data knowledge, big data science, basically. And finally, you need also to be able to interpret those results, because they're going to tell you that you have that much deforestation, that you have that much legality and illegality in certain territories. But in order to make sense to that and basically come up with policy suggestion, having a social science perspective of things, a management science perspective of things, it's very important. So I'm bringing here those different issues in those different layers of the problem solving, just to give you also an idea of how interdisciplinary this kind of work has to be. And thanks to a big team which is behind us, we have been able to engage and to answer these kinds of problems. And so basically here's, it's an overview of most of our team members, which are led by Professor Vitaldo Soares Filho, who is the coordinator of the Center for Remote Sensing, which actually one of the leading experts in spatial modeling, and has been developing the Dinamica EGO software, which is a free software based on which we develop our modeling. Also Felipe Nunes, which one of the lead modelers in our group, and myself as coordinator of the laboratory for the management of environmental services, in addition to GIS experts, human geographers, social scientists, computer scientists, in order to climatologists. So it's basically, we are talking here about a wide array of expertise which are brought together in our team. And there is also a long trajectory that we had to basically go through in order to reach where we are. And starting from the work led by Professor Vitaldo Soares Filho on modeling deforestation in the Amazon in the early 2000s, and which basically was possible thanks to the development of Dinamica EGO, which is a software which nowadays is used in more than 30-40 different countries, that led us to understand the land use in Brazil from the present and the future. And since we needed to project land use in the future, it was very important for us to understand what are the limits of that expansion. And the limits are mostly not only physical limits in terms of suitability of certain parts of the country for certain crops, but also the legal possibility for clearing those areas and using those areas according to the legislation. That's why in 2014, we managed to finish a study that was also published in Science called Cracking Brazil's Forest Code, where we applied for the first time the spatial modeling of the forest code for the entire country in order to understand how much forest surplus different farms have, which means basically forests that are beyond what is required by law, and how much forest debt those farms have. So basically they have deforested too much. And it was basically expanding on this approach now at property level, and with a 5-meter resolution model that we developed our latest research, which was published in 2000 early this year, a few months ago, as Rotten Apples of Brazil Agribusiness, also in Science. And this is the schematic of what we have developed. So first, there is a first part of the problem, which is about trying to model the Brazil Forest Code, which means bringing together here the data about the CAR, which is a registry in Brazil, which identifies every single farm. Then also it's very important to combine with those property boundaries also land use data, and this comes mostly from INPE, which provides the annual deforestation, but also we use Map Biomas, which is an initiative from research from universities and also NGOs in Brazil, which has a time series for different years. And when these data sets are combined in the model in Dinamica EGO, from here what we have is the reading of that specific landscape and understanding of whether that specific farms has had deforestation or not, and to what extent that deforestation has been done within the bounds of the legislation or not. And then there is a second problem here, which to basically try to understand if this specific farm has been producing soy and exporting soy. And then on the other hand, we need to understand if that specific farm is producing beef and exporting beef, which has further complexities I'm going to show you next. So this gives an idea of the data sets that we use, such as the hydrography provided by the Brazilian Agency of Waters, ANA, the land use from INPE and from Map Biomas, and the CAR registries, which are all combined, and then provide us the ability to cut and to understand first at municipal level and then at farm level. And here is an example of an analysis at farm level where the model identifies which are the areas which have deforested within the boundaries and which are the areas that have deforested beyond the legal boundaries. Most importantly, in the case of Brazil, in most states, every single farm has to conserve at least 20% of native vegetation, while in the Amazon, they must conserve 80% of native vegetation, in addition to keeping repairing forests. So the model verifies those different features in addition to other ones also found in the Brazil's forest code. And as you can imagine, this involves a major computational task, and because of that, we have been working very hard inside, basically adapting our own software with Dinamica EGO to be able to work in such vast amounts of farms, applying parallel computing. We have been also developing the software to better to make the best use of specific hardware sets. So rather than using on the cloud computing of approaches, provided by Amazon or Google, we have decided to do this using our own hardware. So we have developed, we have adapted the software to run on high-end gaming computer, which actually makes good use of graphic cards and the GPUs in order to do this using GPUs and also parallel computing. And in this way, while before in the first versions of the model, some of the analysis of a state which is the size of Mato Grosso, it's about the size of France and Germany combined. Before it was taking something even a month to complete the analysis. Now we are able to do the same analysis in a matter of hours within the same day. And these are some of the results that we found in our research. First of all, is the reading of the forest code compliance. So to see what's the situation of every single farm. So every one of those little squares here in red and green is an individual farm, and the ones in red are the ones that have more forest depth. So basically they lack forests, and the ones in green, they have forest surplus. And what we found is that in total in the Amazon, a little more than a half of all farms have about half of the farms are non-compliant with the forest code, mostly because they lack the riparian forests around rivers, and in the Cerrado is actually about the same percentage. And actually, this was one of the surprising results we had, because in the Cerrado, the conservation requirements are about 20 to 35% of the property area, and in the Amazon, it's about 80% of the property area. And rather than having, for instance, a much higher level of compliance in the Cerrado in relation to the Amazon, had similar levels of compliance, which indicate that one of the key problems here is not so much the level of conservation requirement, but more the lack of enforcement that leads, even in the Cerrado, where requirements are lower, people to go in the forest what they could not, so the forest illegally. So after having calculated here what's the situation of every single farm, we are able then to say, okay, the deforestation has taken place in that farm as detected by IPES monitor systems, most specifically PRODES. Okay, is that deforestation potentially legal or illegal? Okay, in order to deforest legally in Brazil, you need to have an authorization. However, that authorization, which is basically issued by the state governments, is not public data. It's very difficult to get that data. And quite often, what has been the discourse of the sector and also the discourse of the Brazilian government has been that, well, since we cannot know if that farm has had an authorization or not, maybe everything is legal. But it's not, right? Because the legislation in Brazil is very clear in terms of how much forest must be conserved at every single farm. So geosciences can be used here to simulate the work of a forest ranger while analyzing the farms. And basically, this is what we have done. And we have identified that 15% of the farms in the Amazon and 20% of the farms in the Cerrado, they have deforested. And then by applying the rules of the forest code as modeled by the special explicit model implemented in Dinamica, we have found that actually 82% of the deforestation taking place within the farms in the Amazon are actually illegal in the sense of potentially illegal because they do not respect the bounds specified by the legislation. Then we are also able to look at the of the farms soy farm because we have soy crops being detected on its areas within its boundaries. And what we found here is that actually there is an even higher level of lack of compliance in the farms which produce soy than on the other farms on average, both in the Cerrado and in the Amazon, with an even higher level of lack of compliance in the Cerrado, which was something that really surprised us. And this is very important, mostly because while in the Amazon you have an agreement called soy moratorium, whereby farmers who clear a specific area cannot grow soy crops in a specific area after 2008. There are no agreements at all protecting the Cerrado, and because of and with an expectation that farmers would protect those native vegetation, also because there are lower conservation requirements, but that's not what we have found. Then we are also able to check, applying the same rules as for other farms, what's the situation in terms of the deforestation observed after 2008. And as we have found, as we see that actually in the Amazon, we have a level of deforestation taking place inside those farms, which is soy farms, which actually is at the same levels as for the whole sample, and with an even higher level of illegality. And in the Cerrado, we have actually a much high quantity of farms which have deforesting illegally in the Cerrado, whereby almost half of that deforestation in the Cerrado is illegal, even though the Cerrado has more room for legal deforestation. From that, we are able then to identify what are the areas which are the municipalities with illegal deforestation, and then to see how much of that illegal deforestation is actually contaminating soy production at farm level. So in here we're looking at not only a deforestation that has happened inside the farm and basically being replaced by crops. So basically there was forest in a given plot, and then there is soy next, but also the deforestation that has been taken in a single farm for other purposes. Because what we have found, especially in the Amazon, there's a lot of deforestation taking place at farm level, where the farmer would simply put, that area for pasture or for corn or for other crops, and at the end of the day, it would be something that would not prohibit that farm from selling soy, but would certainly be an issue because we are talking about soy being produced in a farm with illegal deforestation. And when you look at the situation at the two biomes, we see that there are some municipalities in the Amazon and also here in the transition between Cerrado and the Amazon, where almost 100% of the soy being produced is linked to deforestation, where other areas, such as here in in part of the state of Minas Gerais and also Goiás, Distrito Federal in Bahia, where actually less than 20% of the soy produced is linked to illegal deforestation. So the situation in Brazil is not heterogeneous. You have actually municipalities and specific farms which are doing a very bad job in terms of keeping and conserving forests, and you have and those are what we call in the article the rotten apples. Those few that are creating problems to all of us. And then we also estimated how much of that soy by looking at, and this is also in combining our results with the results and the modeling by Trace, which is a platform which has been monitoring exports for a long time now, and basically seeing how much of that soy being produced in the farms are being then sold to different soy traders, and then where to whom those soy traders are selling that it's produced, and to which countries within the EU those products are being bought. But now it comes to the next problem, which is beef production, which is actually much harder to monitor than soy production, because in contrast to soy, where you can actually see the crops using remote sensing, you cannot see the cows as much using remote sensing. At least it's still a challenging proposition, because we would need some very high resolution satellite imagery, and we don't have that right now available for the entire country, nor methodologies available for doing that for the entire country. But in order to do that, we have some other documents that might be helpful. In particular, we have the environmental registry that I mentioned briefly, which have actually, whereby all farmers register with their names and also their ID numbers. And this same level of information is also available in a document called GTA, Guia de Transporte Animal, or Cattle Movement Authorization, whereby a farmer, by law, is required to declare to the government to whom he's selling its cattle before it's actually sent the cattle on its way. And so it's possible to cross those two data sets and then to be able to identify and to see what are the farms selling to whom, and to form the network with the different knots of that movement. Of course, there are some challenges here, especially because, for instance, you might have a farm registered to a company, and then you have the GTA on the name of a specific person. So you need basically to be able to access public databases with the names of the partners of a specific company in order to identify who are these people. Also, there are problems related to farm names. Sometimes you have some slightly different farm names identified in one document and the other. So you need to have actually to apply some smarter big data methods to join those different data sets. And also another big challenge is how do you form that network and understand where the meat is going? Because at the end of the day, all cattle is going to be slaughtered by different meat packers, small and big. Mostly big ones. The big meat packers, especially in the Amazon and the Cerrado, they dominate the landscape. Just 4 companies are responsible for more than 60% of all cattle slaughtered in the region. And those companies, they actually, already most of them, have system to monitor the direct suppliers, which means they would basically check if that specific farm had or did not have a specific or did not have deforestation, and if they do not have, for instance, like this red one, it would be blacklisted. Otherwise, it would sell the produce. However, what we see quite often are situations whereby this guy is not deforesting, so in theory, it could be selling its meat to the meat packer. However, this guy is buying cattle from someone that has deforested. And so we have the situation of this big world of indirect suppliers, which right now they are invisible to the meat packers themselves. And so in order to identify them, what we have done was combine the cattle movements and mapped the relation between the different farms, and also established a certain rules whereby if, for instance, like in this case, more than 20% of the cattle coming to specific node is coming from farms with deforestation, we consider that node then a deforestation node, even though that node might not have the forest itself, or even cases where we do not have spatial data about that specific node, because quite often, about in 30% of the sample, we were not able to identify the specific farm that's selling or buying cattle. And this enables us to visualize the supply chain like this, whereby we have, for instance, here in red, the individual farms, which are direct suppliers to slaughterhouses, and the yellow ones, which are the indirect suppliers to slaughterhouses, but are basically, which are also selling to slaughterhouses, but they are buying from other smaller farms quite often with deforestation. And this is the situation that we see. We have mapped a total of 11 million cattle that have been slaughtered in the state of Pará between 2006 and 2019. And what we have found is that actually less than 1 million of those cattle slaughtered, we could not find any trace of contamination by deforestation. Then you have the problem of direct contamination. So basically direct deforestation, where a cattle has been sold directly to a slaughterhouse with deforestation. However, the biggest problem is actually on indirect level 1, which are basically the farms that sell to someone that then sells to the farm, the slaughterhouse in the end. And so basically, right now the monitoring systems adopted by the private companies that are looking only at the direct, they are only literally only looking at the tip of the iceberg. Most of the problems are in indirect suppliers. And so we had a major policy impact in our research with more than 80 news articles, in radio and TV all over the world, The Guardian, BBC, Deutsche Welle. I myself had to really spend a lot of time talking to journalists, giving also interviews in 4 different languages. So it has been really, really challenging. And also with the article, that has led to in-depth engagement with the NGOs and also with the private sector. Quite a few companies have been talking to us and coming to us to try to establish some forms of collaboration. Also, we had an agreement with the state of Pará, jointly with INPE, and actually Alessandra, that's here as one of the chairs, has also been involved in some of the conversations here. So she's also directly and indirectly part of the team here. And also we have been involved in workshops with European Union officials and German officials, trying to bring those ideas also into policy that's being discussed right now at the EU level. And also we have helped a congressman called Zé Silva, which actually happens to be from the Agricultural Caucus, to come up with a bill, a law proposal to basically improve the transparency and the monitoring of supply chains. Of course, that has not been easy. It has been very challenging, and I would put the main challenges here in terms of first having to work in a very multidisciplinary environment where we had to talk all the time with people from law, from computer science, from different branches of engineering, from remote sensing. Also very dynamic, because as we moved with the research, the situation has changed. We had a new government, we had a hike in deforestation, we had the new debates going on at the level of the European Union. So basically, as we were writing the article, and as the article was under review, for instance, in Science, we had some changes going on also at the EU level that had to be incorporated. And also it has been very demanding, not only research-wise, in terms of putting together all these data set and working with this team, but also in terms of communication, because since it's something with a lot of interest and a lot of demand from other sectors, private sector, government, and so on and so forth. Also, we had also really to divide our time between doing the actual research and communicating, dealing with other publics and other users. For that purpose, actually, we are dealing here with big science. We have to put together, and mostly thanks to the work of Professor Bertaldo in the last 20 years, to put together a big team doing big science with a large, well-integrated team, and also with making a huge effort to have stable funding sources in order to keep up that infrastructure. And especially right now, where Brazil's public research money is increasingly lower, we had to really compete internationally to get those resources, and also to work very closely with different sectors in order to be able to combine a work which is applied also with some basic science work. And finally, actually more important and more challenging, the technical scientific ones, which have been really challenging, were the social, legal, and managerial obstacles. So which really shows the need of having your team also social scientists, people which are engaged with policy, people that understand how decision making is made at political level, and how to connect with those processes. Which of course it's an additional challenge here. That's it. Thank you very much for your attention, and if you have any queries, just get in touch. Thank you very much. Professor Veraldo, I think you don't have the audio here.
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Professor Rajão, for delivering us this wonderful talk. It is a nice opportunity for us all to know a bit more about the Amazon and also the Cerrado, that is our Brazilian savanna. We will start now the discussion sections for the participants. They can write actually the questions. These discussion sections I will hand to Dr. Alessandra Rodrigues Gomes from Sensipan and INPE. Thank you for being here. And also to a very recent Dr. Gabriela Takahashi Mayoshi. Thank you also for being here. And I don't want to make it longer than 30 minutes. So if the audience has some questions, please write in the chat, okay? And in case that we have several unanswered questions, okay, I will ask Professor Rajão actually to answer them and put in our webpage, okay? So now we can start the discussion section then. There is one question here from Flavia. If Alexandra wants to read it.
Okay, Geraldo, thanks for your presentation, Raoni. Well, the first question is from Flavia. How to solve, you changed the first one. How to encourage, let me know if 1 or 3. Okay, 3, stop there. How to solve the problem of Cerrado and Amazon ecotony transition area, where we have a great challenge in distinguishing between the Cerrado and Amazon biomes. What do you think, Raoni?
Well, this is a big problem, and I think there is no easy solution beyond officially defining what is Cerrado and where's the Amazon. Just to give you an example how it works in practice right now in the state of Mato Grosso in particular, where farmers that find themselves in the Amazon biome according to IBGE map, they would look for the Rajão map to see whether they are in the Cerrado there. If they are in the Cerrado, they would ask the government to look at the other map, which allowed them to clear more. And even if they are both in the Cerrado, in the IBGE map, in the Rajão map, as part of the Amazon, they would still pay for a forest engineer to come by and evaluate the area, and with a very high chance of fraud, because it's basically one guy being paid to tell whether a farmer can use 20% of their farm or 65% of their farm, which is more than 3 times more, which means having a land that's 3 times that's worth 3 times more money than if you are in the other side. And so in the same way, you have quite often a very arbitrary division between a country. So there is like a borderline that passes here. We also need, in this case, a clear map that shows this is the borderline. Otherwise, we are going to always have that kind of debate, especially because due to climate change, we have in a savanization, we have a change in the aspects in the phytophysiognomy of the area, and also if you have an area of forests and you put fire in that area for many years, especially in those areas where there is some transition, what it used to look like. So we used to have a phytophysiognomy as forest. After a few years, it will look like Cerrado. Not because it was born that way, because you made that way, and then you have a prize. You can then clear that area rather than conserve it. So I think it's an issue that should be decided more from a bureaucratic point of view, a legislative point of view, than a scientific point of view.
Okay, thank you. I think that you can answer Flavia, and I will. Can I start with the continue with the second question, Geraldo? Geraldo, you are without mic.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, Gabriela and you can both
okay, so
share actually reading. I will try to highlight the questions here.
Okay, Gabriela, we can sit, read the next one, okay?
Okay, thank you, Alessandra. Thank you, Raoni, also. Flavia is asking how to encourage the local community to be more interested in working with companies that preserve forests than with those that deforest.
Well, I think when you talk about local communities, it's a very wide range of actors, and you have on the one hand farmers which actually are really serious about doing a good job, and others that are not, and then you have indigenous populations which suffer from the expansion of agricultural production. So I think it's very difficult to adopt a very bottom-up perspective where it starts from the ground. What quite often is much more effective is when us, consumers, buyers, countries that buy from Brazil basically require Brazilian companies to be more serious about Brazil's own legislation, and then companies should be more seriously about where they're buying from, and then they're going to go to the local community, to the farms that provide the beef and the soy to them, and basically say, well, I'm not interested in buying soy and beef from deforestation. You need to get your act straight. And this this can be very transformational, because right now, one of the sad stories about this is that if you are a farmer that does everything all right and do not deforest and try to produce the most sustainable way, which actually I'm from a family from a farmer's family. We still have produce some cheese here in Minas Gerais. It's quite cliche because Minas Gerais is very famous for the cheese. And in comparison to other farmers that go there and deforest everything, we are losing money, right? We're the ones at basically losing. And unless there is a strong enforcement of the legislation, and unless they have companies which actually are really invested in make that differentiation, then the farmers that are doing good are the ones to lose first.
Yes, I think the farmers wants to sell.
Yeah, okay. Well, the next question is from Mohammed Helmi. I think that is very interesting because it's related to my work, my job here. Raoni, how was the role of Brazilian satellite to facilitate the missing data, which was critical for spatial modeling for this problem regarding tracking illegal activities?
Mm-hmm. Well, actually, Alessandra would be even better to answer to that question. And actually, I would give her the floor to complement if she wants to. I mean, one of the huge differences which made our work possible has been the work done mostly by INPE in the last years, because when you have a good satellite monitoring system going on, such as PRODES, that becomes the infrastructure, the basis for other work, and then you can start scaffolding and deal with other issues and try, for instance, to understand why is it so. What is the linkage between deforestation and supply chains, as we have done in this specific research, and so it's very important to keep that and keep supporting that, and also it's very important, I believe, to have that as a separate institutions from the ministries themselves and from the users themselves, some of the final users themselves, because that distance allows allows for stronger rigor and neutrality in this process. So that's why I think it's very important to basically to recognize the work that has been done by the Brazilian Space Institute in all those years in providing that data infrastructure.
Yeah, thank you, Raoni. I think that we are not in this phase. We don't have data. We have a lot of data. We have to choose what kind of data we can use and what kind of monitoring we can handle to handle with this kind of questions. So I think that the choose is not only technical, but in our country is more political, to decide what kind of data we can use and how we can help or try to avoid the deforestation or this kind of illegal practices. So we are waiting for the new signs of the new time with this amount of data. Okay, Gabriela?
Yes, Yara Nascimento, she wants to know if this methodology can be replicated for other production chains.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Yara. Yes, it's possible to do that, and indeed one of the the possibilities it's that we have been considering is for timber monitoring, because also we have a similar document which is issued as timber moves through the supply chain, and but then potentially it's possible to apply that, for instance, even for the countries. For instance, in Argentina they have a farm registry system as well, a cataster, and you have the maps with, for instance, Hansen is working on a soy map. So theoretically, it would be possible to do a similar job there and apply the methodology there. Data limitations, especially to know where the farms are and where the soy is, these are basically tends to be the most limiting problem. And then the cattle is another big issue as well.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Gabriela. Thank you, Raoni. Raoni, there is a question here. Is there any study for a global certification of meat of soy and soy products similar to what is done with wood and FSC's Forest Steward Council or some certification or something? Do you think that?
That's actually a very good question, and there has been some debates, especially at the EU level, about that. However, I don't think that's going to work, because timber certification is not working. If you look, for instance, independent evaluations of forest certification being exported to Europe, what we found is that when the state finally go there and check whether there has been all the timber bought by a specific company in Europe has had all the certifications, they usually find a very high level of irregularities, and the punishment is very low. For instance, in this study, I forgot the institution that has done it, they have found that the fine for importing illegal timber in the UK is something like £3,000. This is the price of a chair, right, of a very fancy table from hardwood. And so if you sell one chair, then you can pay the fine, and then it's fine. If you still buy from Brazil, Africa, and from other countries, even if it's illegal. So I think the solution here is not so much investing more money on private certification, tend to be very expensive, but investing more money on independent, transparent monitoring, such as the one provided by INPE, such as the registry that we have for our farmers in Brazil, such as the study that we have done that have combined those different elements, and then freely and openly provide that data from the different groups. And then based on that, I think we are going to be able to have a more accountable supply chain and a supply chain with less deforestation.
And do you also intend to use this new methodology apply this methodology in the planet changes?
Yeah, there's been this new set of imagery provided by a contract by the Norwegian government, whereby they're going to provide monthly mosaics at 3 meters resolution, provided by Planet, but also by Airbus, which actually can enable some new applications, but not for deforestation, in my view, because deforestation is something which does not, it doesn't matter, even from a supply chain point of view, if a tree, right, a 3 meters by 3 meters area that used to be green is not green anymore. A tree has fallen. The problem is not about a tree. The problem is about huge areas. And we're talking about here some deforestations that cover areas of hundreds and hundreds of hectares. And right now, with the resolution that we already have in the monitoring systems provided by INPE, which is at 30 meters, it's plenty to detect supply chains. And also, we have to be very careful, because you might have an ultra precise monitoring of land cover, but then if you don't have a property database which is as precise, it doesn't matter. And quite often you have many problems in the car registry. That's why, for instance, in our study, we have adopted as in order to observe the as a sensibility test. And we have considered only deforestation, illegal deforestation, when it's beyond 6 hectares, which is the minimum mapping area from PRODES, and also when it's at least 12 hectares. So you don't need 3 meter satellite imagery to find 6 hectares. which, you know, it's 60,000 square meters, something like this, if, you know, top of my head. So it's, you're talking about big areas here. However, if one thing might be, for instance, actually it's a challenge here for the remote sensing guys hearing us. Maybe we are able to identify and do the count of how many cattle heads you have in a single farm. Who knows, right? Or maybe we can also, another big agenda is forest restoration, regeneration, especially as the initial moments for the first years, where the 30 meters was not going to see the seedlings and the initial process of forest regeneration. So I think there are many other applications that it's possible to do with those 3 meters, but not necessarily deforestation.
Okay, thank you, Raoni. And what about the computational resources needed for this kind of research? Maria Banti is asking too.
Yeah, as I mentioned briefly during my talk, this has been one of the key challenges here, and we have tested different approaches. We have tested, you know, running our own big server that has cost, you know, quite a few $1,000s. We have tried also to send things to cloud computing and to see how it behaves. But in the end of the day, the best solution we have found was to buy high-end computers for especially gaming computers, especially because of the GPU, which costs around $10,000 to $20,000. So these are not cheap, but, you know, it's feasible for a research group to have that. And then to adapt our software and adapt the modeling to best use those resources. And actually, right now, we are getting faster results and better results than Google and Amazon Web Services in our little homemade server. Why? Because we are making this very good fit between software, hardware, and modeling, which often is not the case when you have those big systems where it tends to use more brute force. And so I think it's, you know, of course, we have to deal with that because we're dealing with so many farms, and our study has covered almost 1 million individual properties, analyzing one by one deforestation, cattle, etc., etc. So unless we had put in place those kind of innovations also in the computer science arena, that would not be possible.
Yes, thank you. Emily, she wants to know, how do we urge government agencies to utilize studies like this in monitoring environmental activities and regulating business when these private sectors insist on safeguarding their operations?
Yeah, Emily, it's thanks for the question. It's a very appropriate question because that's the situation we have right now. You know, companies are the ones saying that they want to do more because they've been pressed by their clients. They are the ones actually putting together those monitoring systems. But this is a governmental responsibility. Can you imagine, for instance, monitoring the mad cow disease by self-regulatory companies doing their own monitoring? Why should we let companies monitor individually, not by the government deforestation? Because there is a conflict of interest. You know, the companies will want to show they are the best. You know, they want to show they don't have deforestation. While quite often they might have deforestation, right? And that's why we have been insisting with governmental actors to adopt that kind of technology with mixed results. We do not have had so much a good answer from the federal government, but we had a good answer from the state government of Pará, which actually happens to be the state in Brazil with the highest level of deforestation. So we hope to lead by example, right? To show that it's possible, and to show that it's possible to do that in a given state, and then other states might follow suit, and maybe the federal government might follow suit, and maybe the Brazilian Congress might approve this new bill that we have helped Congressman Zé Silva to develop, and then to make that a countrywide monitoring system.
Okay, thank you, Raoni, and sorry for changing all the order of questions. Sorry, everyone. But the next question is from Maria Banti again. She would like to ask, what is the scalability that you talked about in your presentation, Raoni?
Well, so basically, when you have the infrastructure together, and when you have that very good fit between the individual, the software, the hardware, and the modeling, it's possible to have to go from the analysis of a single municipality up to that you can do in your laptop, up to the analysis of an entire biome or even the entire country that you can do in those specially built little servers that they have been talking about. So it's possible to scale that up. But of course, you know, it's maybe the difference here is that we're not using an off-the-shelf solution, right? So if, for instance, someone is to develop that kind of solution to another country, to another context, they will need to see what are the rules to be applied, what are the data sets to be applied, and then also adapt, if possible, the software to the specific needs.
So thank you. And Benjamin, he wants to know if there is any international law to force the governments to prevent deforestation.
Well, there isn't an international law such as that because you know, every country in the world is sovereign, so it has the freedom and to establish its own regulations. So Brazil can basically has the liberty and has the sovereignty to say, well, in my country, I allow a certain level of deforestation to take place under the law. But however, if you look at international trade regulations, and for instance, also the rules that has been put inside the under negotiation now agreement between Brazil and Mercosur and the European Union, what is establishing there is that a country can decide what level of environmental conservation and protection it has. However, a country must do its best to implement its legislation, and it cannot have an undue advantage by not implementing its own legislation, because basically that's with, you know, let's say the European companies really work hard to follow its own laws, and Brazilian companies don't work hard to implement its own laws because the Brazilian government close an eye. That could be an infringement of international regulations on trade. So there is this possibility. And that's why, for instance, in our research, it was very important not only to look at deforestation, generally speaking, but legal versus illegal deforestation, because it's about the ability of Brazil and the ability of the companies to produce following the legislation or not.
Yes. And I think it's also related with, we can also relate this with the Amazon Fund, because Norway and Germany, they suspend this Amazon Fund because of the amount of deforestation in the legal Amazon, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's possible to say that, but it's but there's a bit of a difference there, because the Amazon Fund, the new money going to the Amazon Fund, it's calculated, the quota that countries can donate towards the Amazon Fund is calculated based on how much deforestation has been reduced in relation to the historic average. And actually there has been an ongoing reduction because deforestation of that quota, because deforestation has been going up. But then there's a second problem of the money that's already in the fund. And that has been, for new projects, also frozen, basically because when the money has been donated to Brazil, there has been an agreement, actually a donation agreement, a formal contract, saying that that money is going to be managed by a governance system with the states, the federal government, and the NGOs and the private sector. Because the Amazon Fund is a fund for Brazil, it's not the fund for the federal government. There's a difference there. And the current government did not agree with that rule. They wanted the fund to be its own money. And then the donors said, well, that's not what we agreed to. So there has been this ongoing debate right now, and hopefully they're going to find a solution to that.
Okay, thank you. And there is a participant that is surprised that I think that the permission for land use change are not available publicly in Brazil. Is that a recent regulation or has always been the norm in Brazil? Raoni?
Yeah, well, actually, we have had an attempt to increase transparency. It's funny because since 2018, the Ministry of Environment has been trying to pass a series of norms, basically demanding the states, which are the ones providing the the land use and land use change, the deforestation authorizations, to send that data to the federal government so that we would have a centralized data set. But that doesn't work. If you go there and look at the data sets, it basically has almost no records. And then when you actually when you are finally able to talk to the states and build the relationship and get the data, you see that the number of authorizations by the states is actually much higher than the ones inside the system. And I think the reason for that is even though it's by law that was supposed to be transparent, there is not a strong political interest in making that transparent. Because if since it's in the law, if the ministry really wanted to, he would even send the public attorneys, right, to force to give the single states to provide the data as they wanted to. And I'm sure in order to pay taxes, they are very diligent in data sharing, data provision. But in order to share data related to deforestation, they close an eye. It's not such a high priority. So we also have not only a legal but also a political issue here.
Yes, thank you. And Mohammed, he has a comment. He said to us, I guess that the main challenge is to spread benefits and awareness within law makers and politics to rely on geoscientists methodologies to monitor and catch illegal activities within the country.
Yeah, I think this is one of the key challenges here, but it's not the only one, because for instance, for a long time, we have been showing that it's possible to improve monitoring and to improve law enforcement remotely. Right now, more than half of the deforestation taking place in Brazil are in farms that the government know who they are because they have given their ID numbers. Okay, there are some fake ID numbers, there are many problems, but at least there's some data there. And still, the mostly applied form of law enforcement is going to the ground, visiting farms, etc. Very small percentage of fines, less than actually 10% of the fines today are being issued remotely, even though more than 50% of the deforestation are taking place in farms where you have that kind of information. So I think there is some methodological issues. Some issues of data sharing and methodological sharing, but also I think there is sometimes a cultural issue because law enforcement agencies are also used to work in a very old-fashioned way and go into the field, etc. And then there is also sometimes it's to enforce the legislation is very costly politically. It doesn't get you votes when you start finding people and basically forcing them to. And in Brazil is a democracy. We need that. The politicians need those votes. So there is, quite often a conflict of interest when it comes to that.
Yes, thank you.
Well, I think that is another question here, Raoni, for you. Emerson Leon would like to know if in your model is considered the fire activity by clearing. I think that is clear cut. And what is the main challenge to modeling biodiversity? 2 questions.
Mm-hmm. Well, in this study that I just presented, we do not talk about fires. We are only looking at clear-cut deforestation, also because this is the less controversial one in terms of detection, with that the one that's less prone to false positives. And it's basically, when you have clear-cut, it's because the farmer has decided to change the land use. So it's usually much more irreversible than a fire that might be coming from your neighbor, and then you can always justify it. Also, what we have here is a situation where you might have which coming to the issue of fires. What we have done, however, also to understand this relation between fires and deforestation was a study with 2 colleagues from INPE, Ana Paula Guiar in Claudio, where we have basically look at whether a fire that has been taking place in a given area, whether that area is forest, whether that area is a consolidated agricultural area, or whether that area has been recently cleared. so that we know what's the relationship between fires and deforestation. And what we have found is that during the high season period, when it's dry, just right now, more than a half of the deforestation taking place in the Amazon are actually happening in areas of recent deforestation. So it's deforestation-related fires. This is not, some indigenous guy putting fire to make a little roça or a little substance farming, but it's actually big farmers wanting to clear the land to put more cattle on. And then when it comes to biodiversity modeling, it is challenging. And actually, we have another work led here in our group by Ubirajara Oliveira. We have been applying modeling of biodiversity with some success. And I would, if you Google for us in Ubirajara and Rajão, etc., you're going to find some articles related to that.
Yes, thank you. And Diogo, he has a question. What about the tracking of the illegal wood from this deforestation? Do you have information about that?
Yeah, it's we haven't done that yet, and as far as I know, nobody has actually tried to apply the same methods we have used for other areas to automatically track all the possible, and there has been some efforts to do this manually, like, okay, this is this area, what's going on, and then basically this is a police work. But I think there is a huge potential there, especially when you relate, for instance, movements with forest projects, which tends also to have some problems there, and remote sensing, so that you can see, for instance, if a guy declares that it's transporting that much that much volume of timber from one area to the other, is that timber being extracted from that area? Because then you can, by looking at the selective logging, is it really going to this other area? Then you can check that as well. And so I think there's some big potential there, even though I think it's one of the frontiers of knowledge. There has been done some work on this, but I think there's a lot more to be done.
Thank you. And there is a question from Fazal Malik. Do you know which countries in the world is doing more efficient work regarding deforestation-free activities? Do you know, Raoni?
It's difficult to tell. I mean, I would say Brazil 5 years ago. Because actually there has been a question in another webinar. People were basically asking, okay, which country should Brazil inspire to do a better job? And my answer was Brazil. Brazil is actually is the only big tropical country in the world that has been able to drastically reduce reforestation with policies, with technology, with monitoring systems, and it's able to do this again, and it's able to improve it again. Another thing which actually is a bit of a difference of Brazil in relation to other countries, Brazil it's actually the biggest and richest country in the world with high levels of deforestation. If you look at the other countries with high levels of tropical deforestation, you are comparing Brazil with Indonesia, Malaysia, Congo. I mean, of course, I mean, they probably have some lessons there, but tropical deforestation is not, or large-scale deforestation is not a problem in Europe or United States. Quite the contrary, there they are reforesting more than they are deforesting. So I think, we have to find our own path, and we have been able to find that before, and I'm sure I'm going to find that next.
Just a comment. Well, I think that probably South America or Amazon Basin, we have different countries there, here next to us, that probably learn a lot of Brazilian techniques. So I think that probably they have. I don't have the name. One name. It is not. It's complicated to tell. It's a name. Is Bolivia? Is Ecuador or other country? But I think that they have technology and the knowledge to develop similar projects as Brazil is doing. Suriname they have very interesting systems there. But well, I think that there is not a how can I say, numbers to prove if there is a success case or not, and if they are doing the best job. I agree with you. Thank you, Raoni.
Well, we are going actually to close our discussion section. I just want to hand either to Gabriela and Alessandra if you have personally, let's say, some questions to Professor Raoni, please feel free.
Thank you. Can I ask your opinion about what do you think it will happen with these deforestations, these supplies provided because of deforestation, with this increasing of forest fires in Brazil, and if they deconstructed the law about these APP areas, these areas of area of permanent reserve. What do you think? It will increase or?
Yeah, I think in relation to the second one, well, our emphasis here has been on legality, and of course, when you basically lower the bar, what is legal and what is illegal, it's again becomes a problem. And so that's, I think, that society has, especially civil society in Brazil, citizens have to play a very important role here in basically telling the government, telling Congress that they don't agree. You know, they want, for instance, their mangues, they want their dunes, they want their forests protected. As for the fires, I think it remains to be seen, because and I think that the key question is going to become after, because fires tends to be one of the stages of clearing. And I think what we're going to see probably next year is a level of deforestation also linked to that, especially, for instance, in areas such as Pantanal. If following the fires, farmers would go there, for instance, and introduce exotic pasture species, and that would basically would allow for a definitive and permanent land use change. But it's still to be seen.
Alessandra.
Okay, I have the last one question. Let's check here because I wrote. Okay, of course that your presentation is extremely useful in current and urgent issues that is happening in our country. But thinking in terms of young students and professionals present here, my question comes from this line. How do you believe that the students and young professionals in remote sensing, in geotechniques can help for support this kind, the kind of your research? How do you and your partners perform the technical procedures to obtain data and generate information for analysis? Projects, scholarships, contracts. It's a how can I say? It's an idea to help the young professional here understand that. Of course, even if we have COVID this time, lockdown and quarantine, but we still have work, a lot of work and ways to move on forward on the geotechnics issues. Please help us.
I think there is, lots of room for multiplication. For instance, if you type in, the csr.ufmg.br, which is the lab of remote sensing, and then you click on the article on rotten apples, you're going to see that we have there almost all of the input data that we use, a very good description of that, and also the models. So, for instance, let's say you are from Argentina, right, and you want to apply the rules of the local legislation that you happen to understand how it works. You can adapt our models to do that, and then run on your computer and do that as part of your master's, PhD, or professional research effort. So I think it's and also. As that is applied to other contexts, even within Brazil, we would be very happy for people to do that. And maybe come back to us and say, look, we have found that in the state of Sergipe, for instance, there is a specific legislation such and such, and we have applied this here. We have added this other level of complexity to the model, and we have used some new data sources. We have come up with a way to do the counts of cattle using high resolution imagery, and there's so many things to be done here, and I would be very happy to see how that evolves.
Okay, thank you, Raoni.
Well, Alessandra actually took my question because the entire supply chain is something very complex and has several components. And my question was to, considering that most of the audience here is young professionals, have finished recently, let's say, master, PhDs, or are doing master, PhDs, or bachelors. So what would be, in your point of view, some open research questions or challenge that could be for them something to focus in their studies if they want to do something related in that subject, and also job opportunities in your point of view that could be also established actually.
So answering from another perspective, I think we started with Brazil and with the Amazon, with Cerrado, and with beef and soy, because these are the most threatened biomes in the world. These are the products most exported in the world, and by Brazil. Brazil is a big country. And then we found, for instance, that 20% of the soy exported from Brazil to the EU are linked to deforestation. But for instance, Argentina is a huge soy exporter, and Chaco is also a threatened biome. So how much deforestation is taken on in the supply chains from Argentina and from Paraguay, and the beef from Uruguay, right? And the United States, right? Because they have their own problems in terms, for instance, of nitrates pollution in the water linked to beef production. So how much of that beef is produced with a high economic impact and then maybe exported to the EU or exported to China? So I think that what I would like to see is this research as not the final step, also because it sheds light into Brazil, but deforestation-free supply chains are global problems, not solely a Brazilian problem. So I think for the different professionals in different areas, that would be a big challenge. And I think it is an area where there are job opportunities, both in the industry, both in government, both in research groups. In our own research groups, we are always looking for talents because it is really challenging, and you need increasingly specialized people in areas such as spatial relational databases. You need people specialized in modeling. You need programmers. You need policy analysts. You need lawyers, and of course for geoscientists, it's very exciting to work in such an environment.
Wonderful, perfect. Well, we are coming now to almost 1.5 hours. I think it's wonderful time here, and I just want to. Oh, most of the participants are still online. Thank you, thank you all. We still have in our webpage the information for our next talks. Please check this webpage. And time by time, the Brazilian chapter of GRSS is also offering different activities. So please stay tuned in this webpage so that you can take part, and for us it's actually a great pleasure. This bring us also a challenge of making hybrids events in future, not only in presence but also broadcasting it. So this is really a challenge, but I think this is really interesting as well. So we can enhance the discussions and enlarge the discussion. Well, I'm sorry if we missed any questions, but I don't think so. If so, we will put in our webpage. Professor Rajão, thank you again, actually, for your time. And yeah, delivering us actually this special and interesting talk. A nice opportunity actually to come and to know a little bit more about Amazon and the challenge involved in that. Nah? So yeah, there is no firewall or any other ceremony. I think we will close actually. Also thank tremendously Gabriela and Alessandra and all the team here involved. Without this support, it was never been possible. No? And thanks again for Raoni for being the first talk of a series of this event.
And if I may, Professor, it has been a really pleasure. You know, thanks for all the audience, the questions. I've been following here some of the comments on YouTube. And for me, it's a bit of a homecoming because you know I'm a computer scientist by training, and then has been a long way, you know, from into the social science and management, and then modeling, and then environmental issues. Through now, it's very nice to be back talking to a community with, of course, with its turns, it's interdisciplinary, but with lots of people also from computer science here as well, and electrical engineering. So it's a really pleasure to be here.
Perfect. Wonderful. So we now then finish our first lecture. Thank you all for attending and also taking part. And please join us in the forthcoming talks. It will be 1 or 2 talks per week in average till December 10. And the topics are very broad, so I think that some of more topics and will be of great interest for the general community. So thank you all and see you next time then.